I believe the Reshaping Work conference is really essential because what it's doing is it puts work in the heart of technology development versus the other way around. I think that's a really fresh perspective to have as we move forward in shaping these platforms for our joint futures. I'm Payal Arora. I'm a professor of inclusive AI cultures at Utrecht University and a co-founder of two labs, FemLab, which is a Feminist Futures of Work lab, and Inclusive AI Lab, which is debiasing data for the Global South. It's fascinating that in the last decade, we've seen a real rise in interest in the Global South, particularly from tech companies, policymakers, partly because it's a data economy right now, and majority of the users, which is literally 95% of young people, live outside the West. 85% of the entire world's population live in these regions. So what's even more interesting is that they fast come online in the last decade, which is actually nicknamed as the next billion user market. So it is not a surprise that they are interested in them because these are data to be harvested and because we are in an AI data war. These populations should not be looked at as mere data points to be extracted, but these are people who are genuinely innovating new ways in which to use these digital technologies, and they're fast adopting AI in ways which we can't possibly imagine. We need to shift our mindset from looking at the next billion population as data repositories to build our tools in the north, and more as co-creators to build technologies that work for everybody on this planet, which is really the majority world at the center. So I hope that happens in the near future. This notion of localization is let's cater to that demographic. How do we localize products? How do we localize services? However, when we think in terms of the Global South, it has historical connotations of traditionalism, backwardness. It's like a population that hasn't arrived yet. So we have a very condescending approach to the local, which is let's, expose them to the global. But if we actually closely examine what's happening in terms of their digital behaviors, for instance, the creator economies, many of them are engaging and are using AI and ways to reach a global audience. I mean, in fact, we've had recent surveys which indicated that the typical young user in the West sees themselves less and less of a global citizen, whereas majority of young people, whether it's in Brazil, India, Philippines, say they are global citizens, even though they may never leave their village, their town, their city, or their country. So what this means is that they are fast embracing these digital tools to reach a global audience, getting in touch with what constitutes as a global metric. And if we don't pay attention to that, we are missing a major chunk of what is happening on the internet. The global north is increasingly getting pessimistic about all things digital, their futures, the climate crisis. In parallel, the global south are expressing increasing optimism. And this is really, on the surface, really paradoxical because these populations are at the forefront of being the most impacted in terms of the climate crisis because they don't have the kinds of resources we have in the Netherlands, for instance, or the future of work because they are technically much more replaceable, right? And this really says something and it demands an investigation because our mindset shapes the kind of questions we ask about technologies, and that results in the kinds of technologies we actually deploy and develop. I've been working with so many tech companies, and gender is like this hotbed issue because it's too messy. And so usually they're like, can we just erase it from our contract? Let's look at a generic population. If you start to tackle that, you have to really recalibrate your tools, which means that you have to put women at the center. But unfortunately, majority of technologies and systems that we inhabit today are male-centric. So people don't like to go back to the drawing board, But what I'm trying to make a case here is that One, for obvious reasons, that's half the world's population. Sometimes, like in China, women gamers have overtaken men gamers. Isn't that something that is worth looking at just purely for monetary purposes? And if you want them to stay, you need to understand how to develop tools that work for them, right? And this is actually pervading across sectors, whether it's healthcare, whether it is, education. It cannot be an afterthought. We can't add a gender element at the end of a product. So if we don't understand that, then we are going to build products that are going to exclude half the world's population. Can you afford to do that?